All right. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We're going to give just a minute or two for folks to join before we officially get started. In the meantime, please feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. We always love to see where everyone is tuning in from. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We're just going to give it another minute or so. All right, let's see. Greetings from Minnesota. I like Minnesota. Florida, nice and toasty. Herndon, Virginia. I'm from Richmond. That's not where I'm currently located, but ooh, Toronto. It's a fun city to visit. Cleveland, Bismarck, North Dakota. Alaska. I actually don't think I've ever had anyone join one of my webinars from Alaska before. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Kansas City, home of the Chiefs. That's where my husband's from. We're big Chiefs fans around these here parts. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today from near and far. Lots of different time zones here. We're so happy to have you join us. No matter where you're joining from, we are actually very glad you're here. Before we dive into our discussion of Employees 2026 Hiring Benchmarks Report, let's cover a few quick housekeeping items, and then we're going to introduce our panelists. So here's what you can expect from today's session. After introducing our fantastic panel, we're going to kick things off with a quick poll to understand which stage of the funnel feels most unpredictable to you right now, and where insights from our benchmark report could potentially help you and offer the most value. But from there, we're actually also going to be sharing a brief overview of the report, where the data comes from. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time digging into the data itself. We're going to be unpacking what it means and how you can use it to help optimize each stage of your hiring process. Along the way, my incredible panelists that are joining me today are going to share their own experiences and perspectives to help us bring these benchmarks to life. As always, we will make sure that we wrap 10 to 15 minutes early so that we can do some live Q&A. But before we dive in, just a couple of quick items. We get a lot of these questions all the time. The webinar is being recorded. You are absolutely going to get access to the replay after the session. We do have closed captioning available via the Zoom toolbar if you'd like to enable that. And we encourage you all to submit questions throughout using the Q&A box down below. Don't be shy. We do love to engage with our audience. It is not uncommon for me to stop and actually pull something out of the chat and ask live or pivot with the guest. So please, please, please engage. And if you'd like to explore the data a little bit more deeply, you can actually download it, the whole report, in the resources tab, and you can do that at any time during today's session. All right, so let's get started with a quick poll. If you have been part of an employee webinar in the past, you know we love a good poll. I love to read the results, and we'd love to know which stage of the funnel feels most unpredictable to you right now. So you're dealing with too many or too few applications? Does screening need to move faster? Are interviews lacking structure or consistency? Is it harder than expected to get top talent to accept your offers? Or is onboarding and retention where you're feeling the most friction? So go ahead and fill out that poll and we can get a sense of where everyone is at today. All right. I think my team told me that you all can't see the poll live while it's happening. So I will read the highlights for you. Right now, overwhelmingly, the top contender here is attracting the right applicants. It's alternating between 60 and 63% of our participants. And right behind that is screening efficiency. So with that, this leads to a very exciting conversation for us today. All right, with that, I want to introduce our experts. Okay, I should have introduced myself to start this webinar. I was just so excited to start talking to all of you about benchmarks. But my name is Stephanie Manzelli. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Employ, and I would love to kick it over to my panelists to do a bit of an introduction, share your name, your title, the company, and a bit about your role and what you focus on day to day. And why don't we just start left to right? Kim Stevens, you're up first.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kim. I am the Director of Talent Acquisition here at Employ. I have been in talent acquisition for over 11 years, started an agency and then moved into corporate. And I'm located in San Antonio, Texas.
Great. Erica, you're up next.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Erica Wallace, and I actually have a really similar story to Kim. I started in agency and then moved into corporate, and I've been in recruiting for a little over 10 years. And right now, I'm a talent acquisition manager at Bamboo, and I focus a lot on high volume and on our customer experience and early career candidates, and partner with the entire organization to make sure we're bringing the right talent in. So I'm so happy to be here, and we'll keep going.
All right, and Teresa.
There's always one in the group who's a little convoluted. So I've actually been in the healthcare space for many, many years. I've been a nurse for 30 plus years, did a little stint in the Air Force, not a little, 23 years in the Air Force along the way in the Reserve and Guard. But I got into healthcare recruitment about 21 years ago, and I have never looked back. So I've always been in healthcare, and my entire adult life has just been all about healthcare. And I have the privilege to be the manager of a recruitment team for Fairfax Radiology Centers. If anybody's from that, I saw somebody from Herndon. So we are the largest outpatient radiology centers. We have over 21 centers throughout Northern Virginia. So that's our story. It's all good.
I love it. Well, thank you all. We're really excited to have this perspective in the room. Before we open up today's discussion, I do just want to quickly level set on what we're talking about today and kind of why it matters so much. Most TA teams are already tracking metrics, and it's all the things we've talked about for years, right? Time to fill, offer acceptance rate, candidate experience scores, a lot more than that, but those are some. And we all know that these numbers help us understand the health of our hiring funnel. But at this point, those are table stakes, and those metrics alone don't define what good actually looks like. So understanding your performance and how it compares to your peers and your competitors is hard to measure, but it's more critical than it ever has been. And so that's exactly why we created the 2026 Hiring Benchmarks Report. So today we're going to walk through each stage of those funnels, from attracting our applicants all the way through onboarding. We're going to share some benchmarks. We're going to share some year-over-year shifts and some comparisons across company size and industry, and kind of just show everyone how performance expectations change based on context. So to get us started, where does this data actually come from? To build this report, we actually analyzed data from 6,640 employed customers across JobBite, Lever, and Jazz HR. And these organizations span company sizes from SMB, 0 to 249 employees, mid-market, 250 to just under 1,000, and then enterprise. So that's your 1,000 plus employees. We also segmented the data by industry, focusing on kind of the five that make up the largest portions of employees' customer base. So retail, hospitality, manufacturing, software and tech, and business services. So the report is structured around each stage of the funnel: attract and engage, screen, interview, select, and onboard, and highlight 3 to 4 key metrics per stage that really provide you a clear picture of funnel health. Okay. So I want to dive us right in. I have our first question that I'd love to kick off with our first panel discussion, and let's just set the scene around how each of you approaches reporting. We all track metrics, but the data that matters most can shift based on the company's context, based on role complexity, based on hiring goals and market conditions. So at your organization, how do you know when your funnel is healthy? What metrics are most telling? How do you validate your own metrics against industry standards? And so that was a lot of questions in one, but Erica, I'm going to lobby it to you and see where you want to start us.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to dive in. And like you said, Stephanie, I think it's really like so much is going to shift depending on the industry, the type of roles that we're hiring, and the market conditions. Like the market that we're in right now is a really unique one. At BambooHR, what we really focus on is there's an art and a science to understanding your data. A lot of it can be not just having really good data, but really understanding it and being able to tell a story with it. So we focus a lot on those storytelling elements. So what I kind of think we focus a lot on is what we're talking about with our candidates and what we're talking about with our hiring managers to make sure that everyone's aligned on that story. One that's really helpful is a qualified applicant ratio, having a really good hiring manager response time, or like what we'll look at is what we'll call our time and stage. So we have different stages of the recruiting process. And then an interview to hire ratio, like kind of looking at the pipeline as a whole. And then finally, of course, I don't think any recruiting team out there isn't looking at their offer acceptance rate and really looking at how they compare to benchmarks or industry standards when they're looking at benchmarking their offer acceptance rate. So I think really those industry standards, they're a part of our storytelling, but they're also they're really like just kind of part of how we're looking at it. It's one factor in many different factors.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I loved how you started with the art and the science. That's my favorite phrase because it's so true in HR, right? There is the scientific piece of it. Teresa, I'm dying to hear your response to this one.
Well, Erica was spot on with so many of those key measures. And of course, I noticed that healthcare was not actually represented, and that's okay. We can help change that within the employee brand and get more healthcare people on these platforms so we can have great data for the future. And I'm happy to share with anybody in healthcare the data that we've seen since last year. So in addition to what we're looking at as they're coming into the funnel, we actually really look at the data that leads to the top of the funnel before it gets to the funnel, right? So, and I'll just tell this quick story. We used to use a rather cumbersome applicant tracking system. Now, I will say this. Anybody knows in talent acquisition that if something ends in the word P, or has P in it, it's great for payroll. Not necessarily such a good applicant or candidate experience. And we were seeing that. We noticed that before we implemented Jazz HR, which is the ATS that we have, we noticed that we would have probably 4 applications per requisition. And of those 4, how many of those were qualified? Maybe 50%. Last year, once we implemented Jazz HR, we really started measuring the data because we're like, okay, because I needed to show the return on investment to my superiors as to why I went through this, why I pushed everybody to this, and it's paid off. We now see an average of 12 to 14 applicants per requisition. And of that, 80% of them through the screening tools that we have are qualified. So that is important. The other thing that we do is we also measure how much time people spend on our career site. So we actually have a landing page, if you will, and this gets more into the nuance of the candidate engagement along the way. And we partner with a recruitment marketing firm, throw them a bone, they're called NAS Recruitment Innovation. And we actually measure how much time they spend on the page, how much time are they spending, how much quickly do they exit from the career site, which page do they spend time on, because we're trying to capture them on the career page to get them in to have that conversion. So that's what we're measuring.
Fantastic. I want to hear from Kim too. I just want to make sure to address some of the questions we're getting in. Yes, the session today is recorded. We're going to share everything you're seeing on the screen. And if you'd like to download one of the reports, you can pull that down in the resources tab. Okay. Sorry, Kim, please tell us your perspective.
No, don't apologize. I think it's very similar to Teresa and Erica. I think the biggest thing is if I can reasonably forecast how many screens turn into interviews, and then how many of those interviews actually make it into the offer stage, and how many of those offers obviously turn into starts. And so I think, the 3 metrics I can really, really want to see, or I really, think are valuable, obviously, are going to be ultimately that offer acceptance rate. Time in the stage will kind of give me insight into how long is our recruitment process taking? Where is where are the candidates kind of falling off, or if they need to push forward, what does that look like? And then I think obviously screen to interview, so that helps me keep insight into top of funnel as well. I think time to hire is the outcome ultimately, and those three are where I can really tell if there is friction, and it gives me more of a I think more of just a clear insight and sanity check, to be honest, if we're outside of any range, or I want to understand, where the pipeline is at. And it can tell me if something is broken as well. So I would say those would be the 3 metrics that I look into.
I love that. I think it's such great insights from across the board. You mentioned time and stage, and for me, that just speaks to operational discipline, right? And it's just rigor, and that's something that we all need to have nowadays. So great answers, great perspective. I do want to move us forward to our first hiring stage, and that's the attract and engage. This is the data you're seeing on the screen. So I want to walk us through some of the key metrics at each stage of the funnel, starting with attract and engage. And so this stage focuses on how effectively you turn job seekers into applicants. So using the right mix of reach and relevance and organizational reputation. So this year's benchmarks show that the average applicants per role increased from 207.2 in 2024 to 257.5 in 2025. So the majority of hires, which is roughly it's just over 60%, almost 61%, continue to come from applied inbound sources. And qualified applicant rates remained mostly flat with 11.5% year over year. And so to send it back over to our panelists, applicant volume continues to rise. We're seeing that in the data, but the candidate quality isn't rising along with it. So at what point does a wide funnel become a problem, not a win? And what's the best way to limit the volume without filtering out the quality of the candidates? Erica, why don't we start with you here?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the question of the age right now that I think we're all trying to figure out and trying to work through. And really, like you said it best, like it becomes a problem when you have too wide of a funnel. And for me, I think that we know it's a problem when we can't handle it with ourselves, and we're looking at other tools. We're having to call in other resources or vendors because we're just getting too much volume. And what we're finding is that, like you said, it's not qualified candidates. A lot of these are fraudulent candidates, or spam, or they're being produced from wherever. And so we're spending a lot more time than ever before just eliminating those fraudulent candidates. We're spending a lot of time and resources on really like trying to figure out how to cut through those fraudulent candidates and get to the actual people that we want to talk to, the people that are really the people that should be applying and that we want to be spending more time on. And our philosophy right now is really looking at allowing tools or computers to do things that are automatic, don't require like human thoughts behind it. So things that can just be done automatically, we're trying to offload as much of that as possible so that we can use our human resources on the human beings that we need to. And what we're doing right now is we've really been able to, we've partnered with, like we use Greenhouse, and we've been able to partner with Clear to help reduce some of those fraudulent candidates. But to get back to your question, I think where we found a lot of support from using tools, we've also just had to pivot and adapt to what's happening. So this is a new problem, and we're still figuring out solutions for it. But we are absolutely having to rely on like AI and other tools to get through the noise and really get to the right candidates. I will say one thing that we've been able to do, though, that's been really helpful is we've partnered with the rest of our organization, and so we've really like helped really make it a team effort. It's not just depending on our recruiting team. It's really like making sure the organization's goals are aligned and that we're moving towards the same goals.
I love that. Teresa, you mentioned in your first response about needing more breadth at the top of the funnel. So I'm curious your perspective on this.
Absolutely. Well, anybody who's watching who's in the healthcare space knows that wouldn't we like to have the problem of too many candidates that are qualified? I always call it manna from heaven if I actually get that one MRI tech or anything in my diagnostic imaging world that I live in, and they've applied all by themselves. I'd be like, yay, every day. So, but what we do have high volume roles, right? We do have patient facing high volume roles, the imaging center hospitality associates. And when we do post those positions, we do get high volumes. Now, as a tactic, one of the things that we've done is we no longer host or sponsor jobs on those larger job boards. They make it way too easy for applicants to just go click, 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 click. And they've applied to 7 or 8 jobs that they don't qualify for. And if I was paying for that, I would be very frustrated with those results. So as a result, I don't pay for it. I've chosen not to. I'm probably one of the few people out there who's chosen not to do that. Instead, what we do, and like Erica was talking about, bringing in the entire team. So we talk to our hiring managers during the intake session. We create questionnaires. And yeah, I know I keep talking about Jazz HR, but that's the ATS we use. So we were able to build out individual questionnaires that help us to really redefine the qualifications for the people that are coming through, whether they're high volume or not. I say clinical, non-clinical, and we want to make sure that they've been able to answer all of those questions. It's always nice to have knockouts. I don't use them too often, except when I post an IT position, because sometimes that's where you get into more of your kind of concern for fraudulent applicants along the way. And we don't have that many IT positions anyway. But the other thing that we do, and what I looked for when I was looking for an applicant tracking system to implement, was I wanted a system where I could integrate other tools very easily. So for our high volume patient facing roles, and I keep saying patient facing, the healthcare piece, we are so high touch, right? So we want to make sure that we're giving them the personal experience throughout the whole process. So we use a nice video interviewing tool called HireFlix. It integrates right into Jazz HR. We send that immediately to our qualified candidates based upon the questionnaires that they've answered. They complete the video. It's personalized, so they actually see me introducing them to the video. They see my recruiters introducing them to the questions, and it's really nice. So we try to control it with the questionnaires. We do a lot of sourcing. Let's put it that way. In the clinical space, we do a lot of sourcing to get the right mix for us. So hope that helps.
It does help. It does. It does help, actually. So, pulling on this thread a little bit more, and audience, I do actually see some of the incredible questions that are coming in. Please keep them coming in. I cannot wait to farm these out to some of our panelists. I am tracking them to keep this conversation going. Most hires, the data is telling us that most hires are still coming from inbound applied sources, and so at your organization, how do you determine the right balance between inbound and sourcing and referrals and other channels? And which sources are consistently producing your strongest hires? Kim, we haven't heard from you in a minute, so I'd love to hear your perspective first.
Of course, of course. And so if everyone doesn't know, Steph is my actual boss and she's moderating this, so this is a fun one for me. But we partner really. We try to make sure that we're leveraging, obviously, the inbound talent. So for high volume roles, we look heavily into the data of what do those inbound roles look like, and those inbound candidates look like, and also um, that typically will do the heavy lifting for our high volume positions. We also look into how are we being intentional about our sourcing, and typically for leadership roles, for niche roles, revenue critical roles, we source. And so a lot of the time, my conversations with Steph are where are these candidates coming from, and are we being intentional about targeting outside of just applicants? I think if we rely too heavily on inbound, you really become reactive. And so we're trying to get, out of that state. And I think recruitment typically is very reactive. I think having the right tools in place can really help you be intentional with the sources that you target. I think the strongest funnels that I see that are blended are going to be inbound for reach, sourcing really for precision, and then referrals for just that cultural ad or that team fit ad. I think if you balance those three, that can really help you be less reactive and less sloppy when you're actually workforce planning.
Love that. Erica, what's your perspective here?
Well, I think, Kim, you've hit on so many of the good points. I know when we're looking at how to balance, the different sources for our candidates, we really take a unique approach to like looking at each different role. And I do have a lot of high volume roles. And as we've looked over since 2023, our most consistent source has been referrals. And we also have like a really cool tool that like will tell us it links to performance. So we've been able to really make a strong connection between source of hire and performance of the hire. And we found that our highest performers and our highest source for actually making that hire both happen to be referrals, which is really nice because for us that means we can kind of double down on that. We know that that's really helpful. It's been really productive. It's leading to really great solutions. And then like Kim, you were saying, sometimes it can be really reactive if we're too reliant on inbound. And I think for us, we've had a little bit of a pivot more towards trusting inbound, which is kind of a controversial thought, I think. But what we've seen is like in the past, there was a lot of energy towards sourcing and kind of thinking like, okay, sourcing is like the true, like these are these hidden candidates that no one else is going to see. And if we can pull them in, we're really getting the top talent. And what we found is that with the market being the way it is, and with referrals being as strong as they are, and then just with like our employer brand marketing that we've been focusing on, really engaging with our teams on LinkedIn and on other social media, we've been able to find that a lot of our inbound have been fairly well qualified. And I think part of that is due to the market and then just kind of how people engage with brands and how people are engaging with their applications. Like I almost daily get people reaching out proactively saying like, this is my qualifications, this is how I've reviewed the job, and this is why I'm interested. So we have a position right now that would have normally been a very source heavy position. And we've been fortunate and we've really been closely monitoring that it's been a lot of referrals and then a lot of people reaching out proactively and that have been inbound. And I think like you like completely nailed it on the reactiveness though, Kim. So we are really reacting to that market and trying to pivot to what we're seeing while still being consistent with the things that make us a really good brand. So one thing for us is just making sure that we're known to be a good employer so we can keep attracting those candidates that want to be part of that. I hope that helps, Stephanie.
It did. It did. I hear sourcing equals precision. There is a lot of interest in the chat about what you were sharing about being able to connect performance and source. So we'll come back to that sort of at the end of today's discussion. But I want to move us forward to stage two, which is the screening stage. This is the stage that focuses on how efficiently and accurately you identify best fit candidates and you move them forward in your process. And so the primary metric here is screen to interview rate or ratio. And the percentage of screened candidates who advance to interview. And so this year's benchmark report shows that the overall screen to interview ratio is 34.9%, which is actually down from 38.9% last year. And so if you look at that by company size, enterprise 46.5, mid-market 35.7, SMB 23.8. And then of course, just as important is our segmentation by industry. And so hospitality, you're seeing 57.8, software and tech 46.9, and then retail 34.5. So that leads me to my question. And Erica, I want to start with you. Screen to interview ratio is often one of the clearest indicators of early stage alignment. And so this year that rate dropped, but it didn't just drop in one area, it dropped across all orgs. And there is still a decent gap between enterprise and SMB orgs. So when this metric is low, what is usually broken? Is it the recruiter and hiring manager alignment? Is it job description clarity? Or is it something else entirely?
Such a good question. And we actually pulled our data too, and it's so similar to the data that employee had and like almost identical numbers. Like it's really like so everyone trusts this is really accurate. And I think it's really telling of the market and the industry as a whole. Our screen to first interview ratios have remained a little bit more stable, but they've been right around that tech industry standard, that 46%. And when the metrics are low, I think there are a host of things that you should be looking at. So one of the first things that we're going to be looking at is like how the recruiter and manager are doing intakes. And we've really tried to get a lot more clarity on those intakes and have more consistency in the questions that are being asked and then in the alignment. And I think whenever there's a big gap, we go back to that intake and really making sure that the recruiter and the manager are having that alignment, that their conversations are happening really well. And I think the other thing that we find is when there's a big gap between the different hiring or the different interview panelists. So making sure that people are asking the right questions, that they're aligned on the right values. And so we've really done a big investment into scorecards and manager training so that managers know how to be really kind of I guess clear, unbiased on their on their scorecards and making sure that the scorecards are kind of staying consistent through the different interview stages. Um, I know there's also like just this kind of like weirdness happening in the market overall too. So we found that for some positions, we might get just a ton of really overqualified candidates, which can put a recruiter in an awkward position because you've got this really great talent, but you're not sure where to put them or what to do with them. So I think there's a lot of factors at play, but I know that this is something that's not just a flash in the pan. It's very consistent.
Right. Teresa, what about from your perspective?
Absolutely. And then I saw a lot of people were asking questions about screen to interview and what does that actually mean? So
Yeah.
within Fairfax Radiology Centers, for us, and this doesn't reflect this data, obviously, but for us, a screen is just actually looking at the candidates or applicants, as I call them at this point in the stage, to see if they're going to go on to the next stage. And for us, that is a recruiter interview. You know, it's a screen, but it's a recruiter interview. We do actually do Teams interviews for all of our interviews, and then the managers go on. But as Erica was stating, you have got to have the most amazing intake session and level set expectations with your hiring managers. And in my space, you know, if I have a very qualified, amazing, you know, MRI tech, even on paper, I'm going to interview them myself, and then I'm going to send them on to the manager or somebody on my team will. And the worst thing in the world is, well, yes, that was nice, but I'd like to see 6 other candidates, please. And it's like, well, you're not going to get any more. This is it. I've wrapped them up in a bow. I've qualified them on all the things we need to. So really having the manager understand timelines. I appreciate the fact that you put in the requisition and you need it filled tomorrow. That's not realistic, right? We all know these things. But just pre-qualifying as much as possible. We don't actually have too many issues with screening to interview because sometimes the applications they're not going to get that point, right? They're not going to get to that point. They might come through, but thanks to the questionnaires we have built in, knockout questions for things like pay, things like being able to work remotely, other things that are required for our jobs that we've got, certifications, et cetera. I think it really helps us just narrow down to a higher quality candidate pool, if you will, to review. So it's really using the tools within your system and then having those conversations with the hiring managers to really get to the facts, like what do we really need? And I'll give you just one quick example, and this could be for any industry. You've got somebody who's been in the job for 20 years. They've high seniority. They've been there forever. They are the knowledge keeper, and they're leaving for whatever reason they're leaving. Your job description might say, "Hey, you're going to be 1 year of experience is all you need." Is that realistic? Do you take and replace somebody who had 20 years of experience with 1 year? So you have that conversation with the manager. You know, is 1 year enough? Or can we actually put like, maybe we're going to prefer 5 years for this role? Or do you have a big enough bench sitting in your department that you can take somebody new? Like, what does that look like? Those are those conversations to be had on the front end to help you with the screening piece of it.
I love a good intake. Kim will tell you, I love a good intake. It's my favorite thing that our TA team does. We have so much good content to continue walking through. And again, I just want to remind everyone in the chat, we are tracking these questions and we're absolutely going to answer as many as we possibly can. But I want to move us forward to stage 3 of the interview process, or stage 3, which is the interview process. It's our third stage. And so here is where we focus on moving the candidates through the process as efficiently as possible while ensuring that each interaction is structured, it's consistent, and it's fair for all candidates in the interview process. The two primary metrics here are time to interview and the candidate experience score. So, time to interview reflects for us how quickly candidates move from application to conversation, and candidate experience scores reflect how candidates rate that experience. So, this year's benchmark shows that our time to interview held relatively steady at 3.6 days, which was up super slightly from 3.4 days in 2024. And the candidate experience score remained unchanged at 2.9 out of 5. So that kind of leads me to my question. And Kim, we're going to start with you. Time to interview stayed steady at around, 3 to 4 days year over year. So even with higher applicant volumes, what strategies or tools or tactics do you think made that possible?
Yeah, great question. I think ultimately automation is always going to help, right? Like automation with calendar integrations, with scheduling. I think if I'm being honest, I think it's going to be cultural. I think if leaders believe hiring is a priority and it's urgent, and they're thoughtful about the candidate experience, interviews happen in 3 to 4 days. If hiring is treated as more of a side task, that's when it drifts. And so I think, speed is rarely a tooling problem. I think that it's more of a priority problem. So I think when we talk about the intake process, if you can really show the value of what a good hiring process can look like in your intake process and the impact of a a challenging one, I think it will be glaring, right? And so I think if you can really show the data of even comparable, I think, we have all had those hiring managers that have pushed back on the interview process. I'm sure everyone on this call has had a hiring manager want to, have 6 stages in the interview process because that they want what for whatever reason. And I think if you can bring them data into the conversation of, well, listen, the market and our comparable companies, this is the benchmark, right? Like this is what we need to stay at to be competitive and not lose sight of what the ultimate goal is, and that is to get a quality hire in effectively. So I would say, it's really, again, it's not really a tooling problem. I think it's more of that, again, that alignment with your hiring leaders on making sure it's a priority.
Great, great. And actually, our chat is lighting up about candidate experience. So I'm going to move us forward to my next question. And Erica, this is coming over to you. So while other metrics tell you how fast and effective your workflow is, the candidate experience score, it tells us how the candidates felt. So with this score sitting on the lower end of the spectrum, there's a big opportunity for improvement. So first, I would just be really curious, how does your team gauge the candidate experience? That aligns with the questions that are coming in the chat. And then second, what are some of the biggest reasons that the candidate experience suffers and how do you solve for them?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is like my favorite topic, and I'm so excited to jump in on this one. I was so glad that we have this to talk about. So we do measure our candidate experience, and we've been measuring it since about 2023. And the way that we do this is that after a candidate has been through their first round interview, we send them a survey. So this is post-interview to candidates, not to people we've hired. And it's done, I think, like 3 to 5 days after they've gone through that. So they are able to respond, sometimes knowing the verdict, sometimes not. And we're really trying to capture that as quickly as we can to keep it accurate. And when we first started tracking it, it was fairly low, but by tracking it, we made it more of an effort, more something to focus on and put more energy into and kind of put just more time into that metric and understanding it and breaking it down and learning how to improve it. So we also included a text section so people could rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, and then they could also respond with their thoughts. So I'll just share, like, our average was about a 4 out of 5, which is still pretty good. So we're still doing okay. And then since we've been measuring it, it's gone up to between a 4.16 and a 4.2. And I think that's going to be that's a pretty high number. We're pretty happy with that number. But a lot of the feedback we got was on feeling like the interviewers weren't prepared. The interviewers weren't aware of what there was that lack of alignment that we talked about that you can solve with a good intake. There was also a lot of folks feeling like they weren't feeling valued. They weren't feeling like they were being heard, or that there was a long kind of delay where they didn't know what was happening. And so we started improving our communication, and we also started improving our manager interview training. We also now do little like packets. So the manager that's getting ready for that interview has a packet with the job description, they have the resume, and they have like the scorecard and questions so that there's a really clear alignment on what they're looking for. And then we've just been really like trying to be really responsive. We've deployed everyone. We've really made it everyone's responsibility to own the hiring process. It's not just something that sits with HR. It's not something that just sits with the recruiter, but everyone who interacts with a candidate, they're part of that responsibility. And really putting that into that like sense of ownership and sense of like this is something that belongs to all of us. We all create this experience. And we've seen those numbers kind of ticking up slowly. But I think a lot of it is when we're not measuring it, we don't focus on it. So I think the first solution is to start measuring it and then start listening and learning from the candidates themselves.
I love that. I can confidently tell you that our participants are going to be asking you for a lot of tips. So I want to move us forward to stage 4, which is our selection stage. Here it's all about closing the deal. It's about closing the deal with speed and transparency, and of course personalization for our candidates. So the two key metrics here are offer acceptance rate and time to hire. So after offer acceptance rate tells us how our candidates' experience feels, how compelling your offer is, and how you stack up against the competition. Whereas our time to hire tells us the number of days between the candidate's first interaction and their accepted offer. And so this reveals how long it takes for you to make a decision once the right candidate is in play. And in this year's benchmarks, the report shows us that the offer acceptance rate increased slightly to 83.9%, which is up from 82.5% last year. Sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. And our time to hire rose slightly to 46.2 days, which is compared to 45.7 days last year. So, that really brings me to the next question, which is when time to hire starts to creep up, where do you most often see the momentum stall? Is it too many rounds of interviews? Is it misalignment between recruiters and hiring teams? Is it slow feedback loops? Why don't we get started with Teresa here?
Absolutely. So, nobody wants to hear that I don't have a large funnel, right? We already know that in healthcare that the funnel is small no matter what. As far as our clinical roles, we treat all of those applicants. Every applicant honestly deserves to be treated with kid gloves and to be given the utmost respect as they're going through this process. So for us, I love this when I was reading this, the idea of a slow feedback loop. Actually, we hear from our managers pretty quickly. I'm going to focus on students for just a minute. So we have a lot of clinical students that come through, MRI techs, X-ray techs, ultrasound techs. What a wonderful opportunity. And we actually get on calls with the students as they're going through their orientation and tell them, treat every day like it's a job interview. So we give them all of this advice. And the managers are okay to give us feedback. We're getting better at it. It's a goal for this year to have a much more streamlined process for student outreach. But I love when a manager says, wow, yeah, it's November and this person doesn't graduate till January. I'd love to hire them, but can you just keep them warm? And I'm going to see if some experienced people apply in the meantime. And the rec has been open. I don't even want to talk about the rec has been open. Time to hire, it's been open for more than 90 days. And it's like, So we do our best, right? Recruiters are not magicians. We can't wave the magic wand and prevent somebody from going to accept another position. So this year we've had a come to the table meeting, and our managers know, let's start this idea of workforce planning, hire these students, right? These are our future. They're coming into us. They're doing the on-the-job interview. Sometimes for 1,000 hours they're spending with us doing their clinicals. Make them an offer. Make them an offer now. And our CEO has gotten right behind that. But what if I don't have an opening? You will. It's inevitable. You will. And if not, we'll find them another home in the meantime. Like, let's be proactive about this. So it's that conversation with those managers, right? Like, no, I'm not going to wait. Do you want to hire them or not? If they're not the right fit for the organization, that's one thing. But if you think they're going to be amazing, but you want to hold out, and I have 9 other openings behind it that look exactly like this one, we're going to make the offer. So we've gotten past the too many interviews. We used to do that. We took care of that as soon as I was hired. I was like, no more 3 rounds of interviews for one person. No, one and done. Let's get them going. We actually do shadows sometimes. Certain roles we want them to shadow with a tech, so they'll actually follow through the tech. But it's the idea of, well, I want to wait and see if there's something better from a new grad perspective. So that's this untapped resource that we're really focusing on this year.
I like your style, Teresa. I really do. I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, we are quickly running out of time, and I want to hit our fifth and final stage, which is onboarding. So this is where we are turning new hires into confident contributors with onboarding processes that stick. So the key metrics at this stage are new hire retention and first year turnover, two of my absolute favorite metrics. New hire retention reflects the percentage of new hires still employed after 3 months, and first year turnover reflects the percentage of employees who leave within their first year. And so this year's benchmark shows that new hire retention dropped year over year from 93.9% to 84.6%. That's a fantastic drop. And then first year turnover turnover improved from 23.7% to 12.1%. So I want to move us to our next question. And Teresa, this one's coming to you as well. Early retention dipped slightly this year, and longer term retention has improved. That metric speaks volumes about the importance of that first 90 days. So given this, what is one thing hiring teams can do to turn the hiring process to change the process before onboarding people to continue to improve retention?
Absolutely. So throughout the time from when they've applied, right, we have a service level agreement to touch each applicant within one business day, all the way through to the time of offer. There is constant communication. We've curated this communication. I hate to say it's scripted, but it is. Don't tell anybody it's scripted. It's completely scripted. We've got our managers doing communication, outbound communication. We've involved everybody along the way. We want each person, even if they are a silver medalist, or even if there's somebody who may not ever become an employee of ours, we look at them as future customers, right? Future patients, because it's the community that we serve. So it's coaching the managers, how to respond to applicants along the way, when to turf it over to the recruiter. So before they've even been offered a job, or before they've been given the news that they weren't selected, but more importantly, before they were offered the job, they've had so many touch points that they feel so special. And we use a tool that we do a video to let them know that we were thankful for them just even participating in the interview, whether or not they were hired. We send them another video when we're about to make an offer. And the best thing in the world, somebody replied, we used to use an asynchronous video platform, and somebody replied while they were driving. I was a little nervous about that one. I was like, please don't get in an accident.
No, don't do that.
But it is communication. It's and I just lots of communication.
Well, before we head into Q&A, you're going to see all of our participants are going to see one last poll pop up on your screen. We really love polls at Employ. And we'd love to know if you're interested in learning more about how Employee Solutions can help you improve key metrics across the funnel. Thank you for letting us know ahead of time. As I mentioned, we have been actively tracking all of the questions that have been coming into the chat. That's why you see my head moving from side to side, because I'm copying and pasting out of the chat into another document. And so I'm really, really excited for us to transition into Q&A. This is one of the more lively audiences I have had. So big shout out to all of our participants today. They're coming at you with hardballs, panelists. So I hope you are ready for this. I am going to get us started with Kim. Hi, Kim. Screen to interview can be very dependent on sense of urgency of the hiring manager. Curious on how you effectively measure and use that metric.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's definitely I measure it with the system. So if you have the right system and the tools, but I also keep a I also, work with my team to understand the importance of ensuring that they are measuring that with their hiring manager as well, and the importance of moving them through the process. Or if we're not moving on them, we need to communicate to them. So I think it's really just measuring it, utilizing the system, but also utilizing your recruiters in the process to keep that hiring leader on track.
Great. Erica, coming for you next. I told you they were really excited about your candidate survey. And so the question for you is your candidate survey sent by email or text? How many questions do you ask? And what is your percent of response rate? Do you know that?
Those are great questions, all three of them. So we send it over email, and it's using the candidate's email that they applied to the position with. And so it's done, it's automatically sent through our applicant tracking system. We use it as part of like the communication that we send to the candidates to let them know about an interview or about, being declined. We would also use that same format to send them the survey. I don't know the exact rate. I know in the last couple of years it's been ticking up, but it's pretty low. It's a relatively low response rate because we aren't offering any incentive. We don't say like we'll give you money or anything if you respond. We're just asking them to help us kind of on this virtue of helping us grow and helping us get that feedback. So I think it's around like 20-25%, which is what we're hoping to move that number up. But we have 7 questions, and those questions are kind of yes or no. You can rate it 1 through 5. Really simple, so it shouldn't take very long. It's a pretty easy one, and then there's just the option if they want to leave comments. But for most people, they can just say 1 through 5, and it's did my interview start on time? Was it explained? Was the position explained well? Were the people who interviewing me aware of the job and asking related questions? Was I treated fairly? Was I treated with respect? And overall, how do I feel about the company now?
Great. Great. This is usually we do have a ton more Q&A. I just want to let anybody know if there's anybody who's hopping before the top of the hour. Just as a quick reminder, I'm seeing these questions pop in again as well. If you'd like to download the benchmarks reports, just hop over to the resources tab. We are recording today. We will distribute the recording today. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for anyone who has to hop that for joining us. But moving over to Teresa, what are the sources that you're finding most success with for within the healthcare space, outside of sort of your standard Indeed?
Right. Well, I think we all know I don't use Indeed. So sorry about that. Although I must say, I do have a smart source resume. I do look for those passive people if they're relocating to the area. That's usually where I grab them from. I use a couple of sourcing platforms, actually. I use 2 different ones because I'm actually trialing them out, and I wanted to just pay for both of them for the year and use them both. So I use platforms. I'm using a Hire Easy platform and then another one called Proven Base. And I have, I'm so niche. It's a very small little pool that I'm diving in and looking for applicants. And it's kind of funny. They all reach out to me, the reps from those platforms, like, do you need any help? You haven't had any activity. And I said, well, how many times can I ask the same people in this 90-mile area, if they want to be a mammography tech? Like I'll get back to you. Like if I need help, I will. So those are the platforms that I use. And then we do a lot of partnership with, go figure, near and dear to my heart, transitioning military and then military spouses. So I got involved with the military spouse employment program. And then I participate in a lot of Hiring Our Heroes sort of virtual healthcare recruitment fairs. We do a lot because in the DC metro area, we have a lot of people transitioning in and out. And you want to talk about bringing grit and some good resilience. You hire a military spouse or somebody who's been in the military, and they're going to bring their all, and they're used to it, right? They can adapt to anything. So, yeah.
I should pause this here. Teresa, I didn't stop us earlier, but when you were introducing yourself and sharing your background, we had quite a few people post in the comments. Thank you for your service. So I'd be remiss to not mention that out loud. As a military Air Force brat myself, thank you
There
for
you
your
go.
service.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very sweet.
Yeah. Kim, how do you make your recruitment process more proactive instead of reactive?
Yeah, I love this question. I feel like it doesn't have to be so complicated, right? Like I think with, my recruitment team, partnering with them to strategically align to their business leaders on, okay, first of all, what are the critical roles that we always need to be sourcing for, nurturing candidates for? What are those critical niche positions? I think having those conversations with business leaders also influences them and makes them trust our intent, right? Because I think it is showing them we aren't trying to be reactive with your org. We understand the criticality. We want to get ahead of that. So I really think it's just, our team has done a really good job of talent mapping with their leaders and showing them the data of their market and the roles that they're hiring for. So I would say just that's how we really stay proactive with recruitment and not so reactive.
Great. Just to follow on to that, as you were talking, we got this one in. Are you measuring passive candidates any differently? Are there any formal flags that you found but before?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely measure on the response rates of our passive talent, and I think too, it's so important to have your leadership. And I was literally having a team meeting with my recruiters or my recruitment team this morning, and it's really important that if our responses for passive talent is and this more goes to, I guess, more towards the response rate, but like, yes, we do measure those passive source candidates. But I think making sure that we involve our leaders as far as equipping them with messaging that they can also reach out to candidates and make sure that because I know recruiters, we do a great job of trying to get as creative and use AI with our messaging and so forth. But I do think, a senior director of the org reaching out versus a recruiter, your response will initially just go up. But I think yes, we do measure our passive talent and we actually tag them in our system as well, just so we can see who we need to re-engage with and who do we need to nurture.
Love that. Erica, what are some good resources for manager training for clear expectations? Or is there any train the trainer opportunities for HR professionals to implement to sort of streamline their and upskill their interview process?
I love this question, and this is another one that's really near and dear to my heart. So we started doing interview training for all new managers. So when people get promoted and move into a management position, and then also when we hire a new manager into our company. So when a manager first joins Bamboo, we put them into a live training for 1 hour as part of their onboarding experience that just helps them understand our philosophy towards interviewing, how we approach scorecards, how we think about bias. So we kind of have this live training. It's only about an hour, and then we follow that up with instructions from our recruiting team to partner with them, and then we have them really like partner closely. We call our talent acquisition team partners instead of recruiters because we want them to have like a consultative approach to working with their hiring managers. So we kind of pass that forward to having the recruiter own that. And then we also have like kind of not flat training, but non-live training where the hiring managers can log in if there's updates to our processes or updates to our systems. And we're really fortunate that we have a team that can help us create those trainings. But I think that any company of any size can do that onboarding live training where it's just basically a 1 hour presentation live. We walk through it and it's really interactive. It's really important to us that it's interactive. So our hiring managers can ask questions and really get insight into how to form good questions, how to create attributes and a scorecard and all of that. Sorry, I feel like I've been talking too much, but I'm
No,
very
you
passionate.
haven't. You haven't. Here's what I'll say. I think by the number of questions that we've received in, the comments that we've received today, I can tell each of you are a wealth of knowledge in your areas. And no, I do these a lot. And normally I don't get targeted questions for panelists. They're usually like broad. But today we're getting very targeted questions based on your responses. And so thank you all so much for bringing your expertise. this does come close to our end of our time together today, but before we wrap up, I just want to be sure to ask everybody to check out that resources tab for access to that full benchmarks report. I want to extend a super heartfelt thank you to our wonderful panelists. I just thank you so much for joining us today. And to all of our participants, you know, you either started your day with us, you had some lunch, or you're ending your day with us. And we just are so thankful that you wanted to spend some time with us today. We hope that you're walking away with clear insight into how your hiring funnel compares to the broader market and where you may want to focus in 2026. A couple of quick poll questions for you as you're exiting. And yes, absolutely, we will definitely consider having a deeper dive. Popped up on your screen, you'll see which stage of your hiring funnel feels the most unpredictable right now. And it didn't pop up, but that's okay. I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Quick reminder for you, this is recorded and you will receive a copy of that recording within the next hour. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, morning, whatever it is, and thank you for joining us. We should have outro music, you know, like the
Well,
end of a
you could just
sitcom.
sing,
Oh,
Steph.
yeah.
Yeah.